Please welcome the panelists to the stage for Leading Amid Change, moderated by Christine Tan, anchor of Managing Asia for CNBC.
Good to see you. Good morning. I'm Christine from CNBC, and I'm very thrilled and very happy to be here in person to moderate a physical panel with a live audience. It's been a while for Singapore, as you can see. So thank you so much for being with us. Today's topic, of course, leading amidst change, puts the focus squarely on leadership at a time when we're all trying to recover from an unprecedented pandemic. And in the midst of all this health crisis, we have this looming climate crisis that we have to tackle, and I know you've talked about it in the last day or so. Also, within the company, there are also growing calls and pressure to increase diversity and inclusion. So challenges outside, challenges within the company, not to mention the scrutiny on financial performance, the bottom line. It is really tough being part of key leadership today. How do we lead amidst all these changes? My esteemed panelists on stage have traveled halfway around the world to be with me, endured multiple swabs and ART tests to be with me on this stage to share their leadership insights on what it takes to adapt to what we call this so-called new normal. So please give them a warm round of applause, if you can.
Thank you.
They are, from my left, Hynes, CEO, Wellington Management; Lemierre, Chairman, BNP Paribas; Steffen Meister, Partner, Executive Chairman of the Board of Directors Partners Group; and Bill Winters, Group Chief Executive, Standard Chartered. Thank you so much for being on stage with me. Let me kick off with a simple question to each of you, because of your, where you come from, and all within the same industry, of course. But I would like you to draw from your own experiences. What do you find most challenging leading an organization today? Jean, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, so I'm a relatively new CEO. I just took over on July 1st. So I am just a few months in, and I think it's not a challenge. It's maybe more of an opportunity. It's just the velocity of how many things are changing. So the asset management industry, the finance industry is in a period of significant change. As you said, with sustainability, I was listening to some of the panels earlier. How do sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, what does the future of work look like? How do we invest in the future of active management? Those are all areas that I'm dealing with as a new CEO. So they're challenging, but they're also tremendous opportunities for us. But I would think it's the velocity of change happening right now.
What are the opportunities you see?
Well, I think the opportunities for us is how do we shift and really become a leader in sustainability? Wellington is a research-based organization. We are making a lot of investments in sustainability, and we should be a leader. And we have ambitions to be a leader. And that means really, really providing our investors with tools, technology, in order to help them engage with companies, have the data to engage with companies. So that would be one area that we're making big investments in.
John, what about you? Chairman of BNP Paribas, former president of the European Bank for Development and Reconstruction. What are some of the challenges you see driving key leadership today?
Well, there are probably one or two key questions. The first one is to put together different time horizons. We need to be focused on the short term. Well, the pandemic, recovery. We need to be focused on the medium term, which is growth, but which is also climate change, diversity, And time horizons are mixed today. That's the first question, and we need to be careful about this. The second point is engaging with stakeholders. This is a big word, stakeholders. It means a lot, but in banking we have many stakeholders. So how to engage with them, how to listen to them, to address their questions, also sometimes not to be able to address questions. And the last one, because this is the core of the activity we have, is to be with the clients. Because we are in the service business, and we need to work for the clients. And in fact, the clients tend to come and see us and raise questions, exactly your question, what should we do? And we need to be well equipped in order to do this. And that's the reason why you see in banking changes within the teams, just to be able to address their request. So all of this is positive. It keeps us alive and young. It's good.
Jean, you're in a unique position because you have both a public policy as well as a private sector experience. Are there differences, clearly differences between the two when it comes to leadership?
Yes, indeed. They are not the same, especially in an open society, market-led. They are very different. But I would like to go back to the last period we have gone through. They have done well in the official sector. I think we wouldn't have this conversation today in Singapore if they had missed the point. They have delivered support to the economy, to society. I can tell you maybe what is for you an anecdote, but it's important for me. Today, European citizens believe that the European Commission and governments in Europe have done well. There is a political campaign in France for elections, and no major candidate criticizes the European Commission and the government in Europe. This is new. They have done well. Of course, we can have a full panel about this, but the end result is okay. And that creates a totally new relationship we may speak about for the future. What is the role and the relationship between the official and the private sector? And it will have to be thought through in a careful way. And I don't want to go too far, but I had some discussions here in Singapore with clients about what is social democracy, what is, support to society by government. And we have gone through a challenging experience, and the result is not bad. We need to go back to competition, responsibility, and accountability.
Can I ask who you spoke to?
Yes.
Can I ask who you spoke to?
No. Bankers are very secretive,
Steffen, what about you, private equity side? Any challenges?
So let me first clarify, because your question might imply that leadership is a big burden these days. I think leadership is fantastic these days. I mean, for the reasons that Jean mentioned, we live in an environment. I mean, this is unprecedented in history. I mean, the change we see in businesses, in technology, but also geopolitically speaking, societally speaking, is amazing, okay? And of course, that means that the focus, you talk a little bit about the time horizons, the focus is, in a tricky way, a little bit of balance between, thinking long term and think a little bit through the smoke screen of maybe change in society and, distinguishing between what is a current trend and what might likely be a long-term transformation, which are two very different things. And so kind of balancing between those. But I guess in our business, we have the privilege to be fairly open to essentially any industry out there, any business, any sector. I mean, we're a little bit focused on certain things more than on others, but that's a time when the opportunity set is just amazing. What happens these days is that if you're on the right side of things, the upside for our clients in terms of returns is, as amazing as never been before. Because there is this kind of winner-takes-it-all effect that you see in many places. And that comes maybe also with, let's say, even more rigor in the way we look at businesses. again, a little bit of balancing act that you think about certain industry sectors, trends 3, 4, 5 years before you buy something. You really build up that conviction, but then you get really, really fast. So I think the business has changed fundamentally, actually, in the last 10 years. But overall, I think it's a lot of fun. We see certainly more of the opportunities than the challenges.
Okay. Bill, what about you?
You know, my previous three esteemed colleagues covered a lot of the turf, and I would agree with everything that I heard. To me, this is fun. It's the reason that I know but I bet it's not too different for the other three. We all ran businesses or had specific things that we did, and we've chosen, or were chosen and then chose to be in roles that were much broader, very multifaceted, and with all the challenges that each of the three have described, long-term versus short-term. Particularly at Standard Chartered, we're focusing on both elements of remediation. And I was brought in, I feel like a new CEO, but it was 6 years ago. It still feels new because we haven't cleaned up everything that we want to clean up. At the same time, we're positioning ourselves, trying hard to position ourselves for a long-term future. And these are multifaceted jobs that require a particular type of leadership. And time will tell whether any of us are doing it very well. But we're trying, and it is fun. The challenge is to be able to shift your mind from some things that are, I think, very, very sort of straightforward and process-driven, to then almost immediately step out of that and think about the longer-term trends or opportunities, and at the same time find a way to instill a culture in the organizations that we all lead that is both suitable for addressing ongoing day-to-day challenges, but also allows you to step out and position for the future. So it's fun, it's challenging. I don't think it'd be fun for everybody. I mean, I know a lot of people who I work with that say, no, I really want something that's much more linear, or I want something that's completely sort of out there and abstract, where I can always be a big thinker and then drive fundamental change and bring it back home. I think the job of a chairman or a CEO or executive or non-executive is actually both of those things, and that's a challenge and an opportunity.
The corporate culture is very interesting and also very important for a chairman or a CEO. Let's talk a little bit about that, because to really make that transformation to adapt to changes, corporate culture is really what defines a company. To build a strong corporate culture so that employees can actually embrace and adapt to change easily. Now, Bill, I want to come to you because you said you're trying to clean up the bank. And I'm going to pick that up because I know you're driving a transformation at Standard Chartered. What is the culture change behind that? What are you trying to do?
The good news is Standard Chartered was, and has been for a very long time, a purpose-driven organization. And I feel that very genuinely. You know, when I knew Standard Chartered for years before I joined it, but kind of as a client or as a partner. And at the bottom of the business cards was this tagline, "Here for good." And I always thought, well, that's cute. It's a nice double entendre. It's it seems to reflect the firm. It was only when I got inside the bank I realized that it is centrally part of the ethos. It's very genuinely held in both meanings, trying to do the right thing and also basically sticking with clients in the long term. So that element of the culture was already very sound, but there were other elements of the culture that needed to change. And then we were going through a little crisis when I arrived, which also left people on their back feet. We needed to get on the front foot, clean up the past. Thankfully, the past is completely clean. There's no more issue there at all. But there's always remediation. I mean, there's the things that we built 3 years ago have to be rebuilt now because the world has changed. And getting a culture where you're constantly challenging, constantly reassessing, constantly improving, and never accepting where you are at a point in time is the key, I'd say the key cultural change that I've been trying to drive at Standard Chartered. I don't think it's ever complete, but I would say so far so good.
How much of that cultural change requires you to change your management structure?
A lot. We had a very, very complicated. We're a complicated bank because we operate in 60 plus countries and wholesale and retail and a broad range of products and all different regulators. So we're already complex, and we had a management structure that exceeded the complexity of our business, and so we streamlined a lot and trying to focus in particular on individual accountability at every level for every key initiative that we were taking. And I don't think we're fully there, but we made a lot of progress. But I think the management structure has to reflect the culture that, not that you are, but that you're trying to build.
Steffen, what is the culture like at Partners Group?
So, I mean, culture, I think, is about an alignment in understanding of purpose, of vision, where you go, rules of interaction, teamwork, what you expect from each other. And it's culture is like super tanker steering, right? You have to, I mean, go for the long term, and you will never be completely correct, and you have to adjust. So for us, culture, especially defined, I would say, by purpose and by vision, is a topic since 25 years. I mean, literally from when we started the firm. And I think we get a little bit of benefit of, that as a return these days, especially during COVID. So people that join us, I think they're very clear in their minds why they join Partners Group, maybe, for instance, not some of the Wall Street firms, because the company is very, very purpose-driven. People join us because we want to develop people, that's the first part, to develop good businesses and assets, the second part, and with that we develop the wealth and financial independence of our beneficiaries. And everybody in the company is very, very clear about that. And then there's a certain expectation how we work together. Our firm is very integrated, it's very, very team-oriented. And this, I think, forms over time this kind of behavior that we call culture. And it's an investment that you make constantly, right? I often discuss with people, what does it take? And, once you build a culture, you're fine. Culture is a very ongoing thing. And you have to make different adjustments. So if you think about a super tanker, right? I mean, if it's nice guy and there's no wind, I mean, you're pretty okay. But if wind comes in waves, you will need to adjust again, right? And if you lose sight of where you want to go.
What's the latest adjustment you've made at Partners Group?
So I would say that 2 years ago, we had a time until that where we had very significant growth. And I think we didn't quite realize, it was a mistake of us as a leadership team, how hard people had worked, and that the company got a little bit too much objective-oriented and maybe lost a little bit the touch on caring about people. So the development, I think, was secured, but a little bit more on, I would say, the technical side of things, right, organizationally speaking. But we realized 2 years ago we had to make a real change again, that people understand, we here as a team, we care for each other. So we had also external people helping us, that was a real program set up. And that's a natural thing, right? You will have that every one or the other year, you'll have something that you need to focus on and say, okay, where do we go now? Where's the course of the ship? And you'll adjust for it.
You're constantly adjusting. Jean, are you happy about the culture at BNP Paribas? Is there anything that you want to change?
Well, I would surprise you if I were to say no. Yes, but maybe one or two remarks on culture. Of course, it does exist, and it matters. Second remark, culture, the way you phrase it sounds top-down. Of course, it is top-down, and here we shall not say the opposite. But it's a lot of bottom-up. People have their own culture, their own tradition, their successes and weaknesses, and leadership is a mix of the two. Leadership is the capacity to have, let's say, vision. I don't like the word vision because it's must be more precise than vision. But have a clear view about what to deliver, but you deliver with an existing culture. You can change the culture, but it does exist. And the real leaders for me are those who are able to deal with this situation. And the success comes from the fact to do the two together and create strong motivation in the teams to deliver. I shall give you one example. We do believe in BNP Paribas, and that's maybe the answer to your question, in a culture, in a business model which is based on diversification and integration of business lines. Why? Because when you have monolines, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. When you have diversity, it's more balanced. But it's difficult to manage a diversified business model because people need to understand that it may be well for them at some times and worse at other times. And I could take the 20 last years and you will see how it moves forward. So convincing people, sharing with people the fact that what we call a one bank model, integrating diversity and skills and maybe results is the way to success, is a great story. And in order to do this, you must put people together. It's not a question of organization. It's not a question of chart. Normally some people like a lot of charts, CEOs, deputy CEOs, and head of businesses. It's not about this. if you create organization, you will never get a common mindset. But you need to work with people to make sure that they have a common mindset to deliver. And that's probably the only way to face challenges, uncertainties, just to make sure that people will continue to understand what they have to do, having in mind what the others do.
And Jean, as a new CEO of Wellington Management, what sort of culture do you want to build at the company?
Yes. So I'm going to go back to, I've been at Wellington for 30 years, and when I joined Wellington, there was something special about it. And I remember a recruiter telling me, this is a special company. And when we went private in 1979, our founding partners really focused on culture. So I think we've been doing it for quite a long period of time. But I like to now talk about shared values. So when I think we're a global organization, what are our shared values that, and I feel like those have to be really tight. And those are, we want to be really collaborative. We want to have very high integrity. We want to be very, very client focused. We want to have a meritocracy, a high bar for excellence. And we want to be kind. So those actually haven't changed in 40 years, and they have served us really quite well. So I have a really great foundation to work on. What I've noticed in the last couple of years, and I think the power of the pandemic, has been the willingness of our culture to change more. If I had to go back to 16, 17, 18, back to your first question, the asset management industry is changing. How do you get such a kind, collaborative culture to shift more quickly? And we would talk about it a lot. And I feel like the pandemic has forced all of us to change. And that's probably the most powerful part of the culture now, sort of the willingness that, we're going to try new things. And that's what I'm very excited about.
It's interesting you talk about change, because to me, often change is afraid, or people are afraid to embrace change because they're afraid of failure. As key leadership, how do you approach this topic of failure? And to what extent, what's the tolerance level like for making mistakes? Jean?
Yeah, so I've been an investor for 30 years, and I'm still an investor. I still manage the Vanguard Healthcare Fund. And so I'm used to failing. You fail all the time. You're a really great investor if you're successful.
It's all right to fail.
So I'm very used to failing. And one of the things I noticed with my predecessor, I found that he, being a CEO, the bar is much higher than it actually is for an investor. The bar to say you can't make a mistake. So I'm trying to change that culture. Like, we need to make sure that we are trying things, experimenting, and then pivoting, just as you have to do as an investor if your thesis is wrong. So that's one of the mindsets that I would like to instill even more at Wellington.
John, at BNP Paribas, what's the tolerance level like for making mistakes and failure?
Well, look, there are small and big mistakes. We prefer small mistakes and not too many. But it's part of life. Of course, each of us, we do mistakes. But there are mistakes which can kill you. That should be definitively avoided. And the organization should do its best. It cannot be the responsibility of one person. It must be the setup, the processes which are in place to avoid significant mistakes which can challenge the organization itself. And for those who know BNP Paribas, you may have in mind what I have in mind. So that's a very serious question in banking. Small mistakes, we do them. Of course there are, but not too much.
It can be very costly.
Well, costly, but what is costly money-wise, reputation-wise? There are many ways in banking to make mistakes. And but this is the raison d'être of a bank, to avoid this and to deliver well. But yes, it can be very costly. But this is not the only case, People are motivated when they get success, when they work with successful people. I didn't say beautiful people, and I didn't say well-paid people. That's a different problem. I said people who know their job, know how to deliver.
Steffen,
Can I add one more thing to that? Because I
Jean.
do think there are mistakes, like you say, you don't want to any mistake on reputation or integrity, but you do want a tolerance to try new things for your business, because it's also a mistake.
It's healthy.
It's healthy. It's also a mistake if you don't pivot and evolve with the industry. So, how do you look forward and say, I'm going to try this. It may not work, but it might be a new area that we're going to invest in.
Yeah, but I agree with you, but I'm going to say something which is maybe too tough. There is a mistake I do not accept, which is cutting corners.
Yes.
When you begin to do business, for doing business, you begin to cut the corners. That's always bad recipe. A sound business cannot be built on this type of mistakes, which, by the way, are not mistakes. They are done on purpose, but they are presented. Never cut corners on your values and your rules. When you begin to do this, it's catastrophe. These are the big mistakes I had in mind.
Yes.
So I think I'll take over your approach, actually. It's just small mistakes, not too many, so we'll start this right tomorrow, actually. It's a hard question, right? I mean, it's a bit difficult to generalize. We have actually two rules, which is you're not allowed to shortcut thinking. So it's not just the corners, it's just if someone has not taken properly the time to think through something, that is something we have absolutely zero tolerance for. And we don't have much tolerance for mistakes that happen more than once. I mean, similar mistakes. The reality is all of us make mistakes all the time. That's how we learn. So the question, I think, is a little bit more what kind of environment you create to structure processes and controls and things like that that allow you to address the fact that people do make mistakes, right? And an investment organization like ours, I mean, this has a lot to do with like how investment processes work, right? I mean, there's an incredible amount of resources these days that we put into investment activities and analyzing businesses and review, I mean, the people's perspectives on these and several layers of, committees, but always making sure there's a face to a situation, someone is responsible and accountable for something. So I really believe that, and it goes a little bit back to culture, I think the addressing mistake is a leadership function, and you really have to act like an entrepreneur, like an owner. I don't think there's like playbooks for mistakes or addressing mistakes. You really have to look at the individual situation and think about what's the actual way of ensuring that you have proper dealings. Is it with the people? Is it with the processes? Is it with checks, whatever, that really come on top of that? And then it goes back to your point, Jean. I mean, what is a mistake and what is maybe a judgment call that in hindsight is a wrong judgment call? I mean, in investment business, I mean, and leadership generally, I mean, you make judgment calls all the time. I make all the time judgment calls that are wrong. The nice thing is if I make a wrong judgment call, sometimes people don't realize. Maybe with some more junior people, that's more evident sometimes. So that's part of it, right? And it's always a question of proportion and, what kind of leash you give to people that, they, as Jean said, right, they can make these experiences, they can actually take risk. I mean, risk-taking is part of our work, although I don't like the name risk-taking terminology so much. It suggests like we're speculating, which we're really not by any means. So I think that's maybe something that has changed a little bit over the last 20 years. I mean, if I look back maybe 2 decades, especially in financial services, I think there was, and maybe especially I would say with maybe the Swiss mentality that you would find 20 years ago, there was very limited tolerance to try things, right? And so we'll tell people always internally in our firm, right? I mean, whatever situation you have, think of it as you're on a soccer field, okay? You play soccer. And I'm not sure whether in Singapore actually the soccer analogy works so well, but in the US I would take maybe baseball or American football. And you only score in soccer if you test things, right? Even the best teams, right? I mean, they need to test and try and whatever, and they will fail all the time. And then once in a while, hopefully they actually, they realize a goal. If your defense, you really cannot test anything, right? It needs to be absolutely crystal clear what you do. So and that is the kind of cultural thing, the mentality that people just need to have. They understand for each situation, where do they play in the soccer field and who is around them in their team? What's their role?
Bill?
Yeah, Christine, I think when you asked the question, you used the word failure. And I noticed that as we've discussed it, we've moved from failure to mistakes, right? They're not the same thing. Failure is quite bad. Mistakes happen all the time. And but even failure is in the eye of the beholder. And I learned this lesson, I would say the good way. This was like 32 years ago, in my first job managing a trading business. I was having a fantastic year. I mean, I was killing it. And we got to the 11th month of the year, and there was a war in Iraq, and the positions that I had completely blew up and became entirely illiquid. And I lost an entire year's profit. That's failure, right? And I've never felt that, actually, I have felt, but that was the first time I felt that kind of pressure. I mean, I have failed. I've blown up my business. My boss, and then my boss's boss, and then eventually my boss's boss's boss called me in and said, how are you thinking about this? Why did you do this? What are you going to do about it now? What are the options? I was sure I was going to be fired, absolutely certain. And ultimately, they said, I had an idea, I had a proposal. We worked it through. The business recovered. We did fine later. But what I realized was that what to me was a failure, to them was a mistake. And why is that? Because for me, that was the only thing I did, was that business. For my boss, it was half of what he did. For my boss's boss, it was 15% of what she did. And for the CEO of the company, who I eventually had to present to, it was a rounding error. So from his perspective, he wanted us to make those kinds of mistakes, or at least to put ourselves in those kinds of positions, which inevitably would lead to mistakes. But for me, it was the whole thing. And it changed me in a lot of ways. One, obviously, it introduced a level of humility that I had experienced before, but at a higher level. Two, it made me understand that I'm part of a bigger machine, and that I'm expected to reach out from time to time and take risks. And that and I completely agree with the comments of all three of my co-panelists around, there are things where there's zero tolerance for risk, for sure. But this was a business decision, well assessed, well analyzed, well justified, with a thoughtful process for how we would work out of it. And once the bosses got comfortable with that, they took me out of the failure zone and put me into the mistake zone. And I've tried to repeat that all the time. The key is to Jean's, I think, big mistake, small mistake point, is to understand when a mistake from my perspective at the CEO goes from mistake to failure. And that's when it's too big. So knowing how big is too big and making sure that you stop it before you can get there.
Very interesting conversation so far. Let's talk about striking the right balance. Because chairman and CEO, the right organizations we all know need to do well financially to survive. How do you strike the right balance between the need to do the right thing versus financial performance? That's always a balancing act, isn't it?
No, sorry, no, it's not a balancing act.
It's not? Bill,
absolutely
go for
not.
The same in the long run.
I mean, we're all going to say the same thing. You do not have to compromise on your values to maximize your profitability. It's the other way around.
Okay. Please elaborate.
Well, I think you start by being purpose-led. You start by living your values. You start by understanding what the societal imperatives are, and including what your clients need from you, and then you deliver that. That's the right thing to do. Those are, and I know these three companies very well, and I know that they're much better than I've ever been at doing this. That's what doing the right thing is, and it has the opposite effect on your P&L. You make more money if you do the right thing.
So are there certain clients you would not take on simply because they don't fit into the values
Absolutely.
of Standard Chartered? You've done so?
Oh, regularly.
I think there's a bit of advantage maybe in this situation in the private market, because on the one hand, I think our some of the stakeholders, next to employees, are our limited partners, right? Our investors. Large sum wealth funds, some of them probably here in this room, a lot of, US state pension funds, UK authorities and so forth. And they realize that they're much closer to the assets in private markets than they will be in public markets, because if they own 0.5% in a public business, they have nothing to say. And they know that if they are a big client of us and we can change things very directly, they have much more impact. So there's a lot of direct discussions with these, how they think about sustainability, D&I, all these kind of topics. But the big benefit I think we have is we can plan for the long term. So no one expects us, to come back, quarterly with, a stat like how, certain D&I numbers have changed and things like that, which I do think actually can be a little bit distracting and can, I think, at least, let's say, lead to compromises. Okay, how do you go about short-term, maybe performance versus long-term? And I think that is a little bit a general topic, right? I mean, if you think about the difference between public and private markets, there is this thing, right? The governance model in public markets in some ways is a little bit broken. And in private markets, you have a little bit more the original governance model, right? And where you have like a board that's directly representing these shareholders or these investors, and they can agree on what they want to do in 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years time horizon. In the long run, and I guess that was Bill's first very immediate reaction. I'm not sure whether we're better than you guys are, actually. I think you're doing extremely well. But I do think that in the long run, doing the same, doing the right, and doing well is exactly the same thing.
Okay, so doing well and making money at the same time. I know BNP Paribas has put a lot of focus on sustainable financing. That's a key part of the group's strategy. When it comes to striking a balance, are there certain deals you would not take on simply because they don't meet the criteria, Jean?
Well, I'll make a first point, which is we do not think that the business should be opportunistic. You can do opportunistic business, and for many, it's the rule, the game. You pick all the business you can do the moment it is profitable. That we don't want to do. Not at all. You cannot be in a large organization opportunistic. You need to know what you want to do, with whom you want to work, and the conditions under which you deliver. Then, if clients don't want this, fine, fair enough, but you don't do business. Which is always a tough decision, that I agree. But this is very strict. And we have seen this on many questions like compliance, for instance. And we see it on sustainability. I'll take one example. We do have clients which have used coal. And we engage with clients telling them that coal is off. Now the real debate is not to say this, it is what we call transition. How do we do it? And the business we have is to engage with them, to speak with them, to try to understand their transition process, and to finance their efforts to get out of coal. That's for sure. The same in shipping, the same in many industries. So the sustainability agenda is to be taken into two ways. What you do and don't do. If you ask me to finance a coal mine, my answer would be no. But if the client tells me, I want to exit quickly over the 3 next years, I need to invest this and this and this in renewable, for instance, we welcome. The question is, what is the accountability of the client? How they will do it? And this is where probably sustainability is changing the business model. That is a big change because that was not on the agenda before. There were different questions. But sustainability will change the way we engage with clients. We need to advise, to support, but I regret to say that in some cases, we'll have to say, well, you don't do. So we cannot continue. That's exactly the point.
How many clients have you lost as a result?
Well, not so many, because clients, well, it depends on the clients you engage with. If the clients are willing to move forward, it's better to engage with them than clients who don't want to move forward. So you can choose. But what I see, especially in Europe, is a very high commitment to sustainability. Clients want to deliver, need to deliver, and they know how to do it. It takes time. They need resources. We are there to work with them. But I'm very confident this process will work well.
And Jean, I know that sustainability is driving a lot of your investing.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the exact.
Interesting.
You want me to talk about what we're
Yes.
doing in sustainability?
Yes.
So I would say that sustainability is going to change the financial market. So that's probably the big picture. And as Jean just said, it's being driven a lot by governments and regulation, and it is a trend that's not going to change and shift. So how do we, as an organization, help all of our investors on that journey to sustainability? I would say the other observation I would have is that it's going to be driven in order to be successful from an investment management point of view. You're going to need to know the micro level of each company. So all of these companies on my left are going to go through a net zero path, as are we at Wellington. And how do we as investors look at 5,000 plus companies around the world and understand their ESG path and understand their net zero path over the next 30 years? It's going to be a very, very data-driven. You're going to need technology to help you there. I think it's going to be a fascinating next 10 or 15 years. It's a very, very big change in the market. So we're both adding resources to help us with engagement with companies. We're adding resources to help our investors from a technological point of view. So how do you capture all that data in a technology format that simplifies and makes it easier to understand?
So in asset management, you need to generate returns for your investors. And this focus on sustainability, does it take a longer time to make money? And what do you tell your investors? To do the right thing means you have to wait a lot longer. So how do you strike that balance?
I don't necessarily think it takes a longer time. I just think you need to have it as a bigger part of your mosaic. So you need to, sustainability can't be the only thing you look at when you think about whether you want an investment or not. You still need to look at the industry. You need to look at the revenues, the growth rate, what their margins are. But sustainable factors will become an important part of that as well. And what the premium, what valuations will be part of that. Because as companies go through a path to net zero, for example, there will be some companies, if they move faster, might have a huge advantage versus other companies if they're slower in terms of the cost to the carbon tax, if there is ever a carbon tax. All of those are going to be things that we're going to need to evaluate that we didn't need to evaluate 5 years ago.
I also know you're very passionate about diversity and inclusion as well. Being the only woman CEO on my panel, how do you feel about driving this through the organization?
I'll tell you a story. One of the CEOs that I've worked with over time, Merck, his name is Ken Fraser. He just stepped down, is now the chairman of Merck. And when I was doing my CEO listening tour, he's a great mentor. And one of the things he said to me, which I think has really resonated and it philosophically aligns, is that we need humanity represented in our companies. And in the finance industry, we're very far away from having humanity represented in our industry. So I think it's a huge opportunity, both for Wellington and for the industry, to attract more diverse people. And I think it's irrefutable if you look at the studies that diversity of thought, people with different perspectives lead to better teamwork and lead to better outcomes. It happens across every industry. And when you think about our businesses, our business is the business of insights, and so we even need more diversity of thought maybe than other industries. And so it just makes such perfect business sense that we should be really focused on diversity. And the other observation I would make is that it's not, go back to Jean's thing at the beginning, it's the time frame. You can have very long-term ambitions. You have to be deliberate in the short term to make change over time. And you have to have a long-term vision. And you can't be disappointed in the short term, but if you're very, very deliberate about it, then you can make progress over the medium and long term.
John, do you and your board deliberate about diversity and inclusion within BNP Paribas?
Sure.
Is this a topic that you focus on?
I think not only we fully agree, this is what we need to do, and we do it. I share the view about the long term, but we can die in the short term. What I mean by this is you need to have short-term goals to be able to do it. I take a simple example, which is how we have a board and an executive committee which are well representing diversity. We have no specific difficulty on this. But the question is to make sure that we can continue to do it over time. And in order to do this, you need to have a very sound human resources management to make sure that at a very early stage in the careers, it's well done. And that's the real point on which we do insist today, and we control a lot, that at the very beginning of the career, this is well managed. And in banking, you have various businesses and functions. Normally, functions do represent well diversity. Businesses, that's not obvious, especially when you go to trading. And that's exactly what you need to do, which is to make sure that in all the businesses, including those in which it is not balanced, you pay a lot of efforts to bring talented people to have a fair representation moving forward. So it's long-term, but you need a lot of short-term incentives, decisions. But the moment you do it, it works well.
Steffen?
So I have to confess that our business is probably much easier than a banking business or a large asset management business. So we own at each point in time maybe 2-3 dozen of direct companies that we control, maybe another 100 or so real assets. So so we don't have to analyze thousands or whatever companies. And the other benefit is we are the owners. I mean, on behalf of our clients. So it's quite straightforward. I mean, we made a commitment to be net zero 2050, 2035, halfway through there, and that's what we tell our boards of the portfolio companies. It's very simple, right? I mean, they will develop their plans. We realize that for some of them there will be more step functions. For some of them it's a little bit more a continuum. So we give them a certain discretion, and as I said before, I think we appreciate the fact from our LPs. I mean, they're very focused on that, our LPs, but they give us the time. Okay, so they allow us, I mean, to take maybe 3, 5, 7 years for those companies where you have to do a major change, for instance. The other topic I want to quickly talk about, I mean, private markets are not really known for a lot of diversity, amongst their staff, and I think that's an important topic. I mean, I guess generally that's true for the financial service industry, but if anything, we're probably worse than that than the average. And this is a bigger topic because, again, this goes a little bit back to the time horizons. It's not something you can change overnight. So what we have started a number of years ago actually is systematically, build up certain programs for female internship in summer and things like that to be very early on recognized, by those still relatively few actually female talents that like to go into our industry, and to make sure that we have a little bit of seat in the row. Actually, they see us, and it's changing. But I have to tell you, the most shocking thing that I experienced was that when we started, I mean, more dedicated efforts, maybe about close to 10 years ago, we went to these business schools and asked, female talent why they would not join us. They would give you outright the feedback like, why would I join this kind of, male club? So we didn't realize that quite at this time, and it was very hard actually as an experience. And we realized, okay, I mean, there's no reason to be, too offended or anything about that. It's just our mistake as an industry. But let's just, get out of the comfort zone here and have very clear plans. I'm not a big fan of these targets, but implicitly, I have to tell you, you have to do a little bit of that, because still today, I can just tell you, I mean, if we look at CVs we get from people from like business school and so forth, I would say still there's probably not more than 10%, 15, maybe at times 20% from female talent. So you have to make that extra effort. The other lesson I think we learned is that don't send Steffen Meister to Stanford to hire female talent. You have to send your female leadership. Maybe that's just for today in this transition. Maybe that will change. But it's so much more credible if we see our female leadership actually, going to these places. And of course, then you get into interview process, you do events and so forth. But it's so much more credible. You have to. It's about role modeling, right? I mean, it's nice. I mean, to have a nice webpage and all of these things. But at the end of the day, it comes back to action. So we need to, run our company in a way that they see female talent developing, taking over leadership position, and that gives comfort. And that is not only for female talent, right? That's for diverse talent, very generally speaking. And so it's a journey, but I think we make progress.
Okay, so after all the work you've done, give me an idea of the percentage of women in your company now.
Well, it's high. It's close to 50%. But I will tell you, if you ask me the question, and I shouldn't probably give you that tip here, that hint. If you ask me a question, so how is it now with managing directors and partners? Then it's probably more like 10%.
And you're working on it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's even actually
So
concrete
if we
goals
have
how
you
we
back
hire.
next year, that number will change?
That will change.
Okay, careful, Steffen.
Pretty sure.
Bill, do you want to make any promises?
No, we've made lots of promises, and we've adopted numeric targets for gender diversity, but which we've hit regularly. So we're now at 31% women in senior management, and 40% is our target at the board level. But and we're almost there. But we have other elements of diversity that are as challenging for us. The raison d'etre for Standard Chartered is to connect people across the world. We're a network bank, and certainly for our corporate business, but even important parts of our retail business. And we have operations in 60 plus countries. We have an extremely diverse workforce and an extremely diverse client population. And we have 6,000 Africans who are working for us, but mostly in Africa. And they have a hard time succeeding when they come to Asia. And we have 14,000 Chinese working for us, but mostly in Greater China and Singapore. And it's not always easy for them when they go to Europe or go to Africa or go to the Middle East. Likewise, Indians, we've got 30,000 Indians or people from South Asia. Not always easy for them outside. So these are different people, different cultures, different backgrounds. But without that group operating as a group, as a single team, as a group of equals, we can't succeed in terms of our core mission, which is to connect capital and ideas from around the world. And that takes a lot of work. That's ongoing effort to create the atmosphere where you can retain the uniqueness of having those different cultures coming together. And of course, Singapore is a microcosm of all of that. Right? I mean, Singapore is the best example of a society that's able to meld these many different cultures from all over the world into a reasonably cohesive whole. But you also see that there are pressures and tensions here all the time, and it comes up regularly. So we're maybe a smaller version of Singapore or something like that, where you constantly have to work at developing the understanding, what inclusion really means in terms of allowing different cultures to not just work with each other, but actually make the whole richer than the sum of the individual cultures could be. And so gender is a huge issue for us, but the cultural diversity is both I would say it's our biggest challenge, it's also our biggest opportunity.
One of the uncertainties we face, of course, is the future of work, and that's a big change looming on the horizon. We don't know what that's going to look like. Zoom has become a household name, as you know, during this pandemic. Can I get a show from the audience with a raise of hands? How many of you love doing Zoom and Skype conferences? No hands? Not at all.
There's one here.
Oh. No, like when the alternative is 13 hours on a plane, it's not bad.
So my question to my panelists is, have you all, four of you, mastered the art of Skype and Zoom calls?
Depends what you mean. If you ask whether we have the technical skills to always
Do you
fix
like
the bugs.
Can you communicate better? Can you reach every one of your employees? Can you say what you want to say? Can you carry out your strategy online in a virtual world properly, effectively?
Well, I'm not sure the way you asked the question. I mean, it kind of implies we talk about like 24 hours, 7 times a week, like Zoom calls. And I assume most of us would agree that this is not great. But I have to tell you, and I guess that was a little bit your first reaction, that I do believe, I mean, this 18 months, by the way, it came with a lot of insights around how we can organize ourselves and so forth, not just because of Zoom or VCs. I do think it's very effective. And I do believe, actually, when we talk about sustainability in travel, I see clearly in our organization, you'll probably cut back on client meetings you do on site. I mean, there was this time when you would go I had that time when we would come to Singapore or Hong Kong for a day meeting and go back with the same flight in the evening. That's insane if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you can do it like these days, which is fantastic, you combine all these different events, that's great, right? So I think there's a lot of good things coming out of that. And absolutely, I mean, VCs are perfect to reconnect, right? Are they now replacing, real human connection, I think, which is a little bit of topic, I think, of this institute's event here. No, I don't think so. I think there's certain things, and it's hard to describe, there's certain things you cannot develop on Zoom, right? You need to have a dinner, you need to have a real meeting. But I think overall, I mean, it was a fantastic development for businesses, and it will be very effective.
Bill, I see you nodding your head a little bit. Do you have all your employees at Standard Chartered gone back to work in the physical world, or most of them are still at home?
No, most are able to go into the office at least a few days a week. But I don't think we've mastered the art of getting the most out of the technology that we've got. And I'm thinking about the collaboration tools that are still in development for sort of real-time sharing of documents, real-time editing of documents. The tools are there, but it's not deeply embedded in most of our organizations, I think. So I think we can get more out of the remote environment than we are today. And we've got some brilliant technologists, both in our companies, but obviously in whether it's the Microsofts or whatever, who are developing these tools. But I completely agree with Steffen that has to be complemented by some of the closer interpersonal relationships that can really only happen in person.
So you were looking at a hybrid model for the future. John,
Yes.
what do you say about this?
I agree. I think we have learned a lot. We have done a lot. And the system has delivered. The economy has not collapsed. So it did work well. But there is a big but. And the but is in your first questions about culture. It's very difficult to share culture in a Visio conference. It's very difficult to share the purpose of a company. And it's even more difficult to share the unwritten, unphrased behavior. And to do this, you need to put people together. I will speak about two groups of people. The young one, I think they have missed a lot. They have missed the corporate culture simply because on the screen you don't get it. But there is a group, I think we have discovered their importance and we had forgotten, and probably they didn't notice their importance. It's the senior people. I can say you are for me senior at 50. 50, 60 years old. I hope I do not attack anybody here. But why? Because it is in mixing these two groups that you transfer the skills, the knowledge, what is a company, what is the client relationship, what are the mistakes you can avoid, the experience. And the problem of these new technologies, which are superb, I have no difficulty, is sharing experience. In order to do this, at least in Europe, you need coffee, you need in the UK tea and milk, because that's the experience you have, and we miss it. And we have to be careful exiting this period to continue to put people together. And I do insist on the fact that we have rediscovered that the 50 years old and more are crucial in the culture of a company. And that we should not miss.
Steffen, you
Can I just add one point? I mean, so we talked about effectiveness on VCs, and that I think we all agree on that. But I think what's really happening a little bit today is that companies, they try to have this generalized approach of whatever, 2 days or 3 days at home, a little bit of office. I think that's a big mistake. And I think that's this general, kind of societal kind of dynamics that you try to please everybody, everything needs to work for everybody. I think that's a real mistake. I think as a company, you have to be absolutely crystal clear about what makes your business worthwhile, how do you deliver your strategy, and how, in our case, how we deliver the returns to clients. And then you go work back from the answer. And in our situation, that means actually we have people back in the office. So except for Singapore, for obvious reasons, our people are back in the office. And this is because exactly what you said, John, I really like that comment. You need to have collaboration between the teams, the senior, the junior people. It's it's actually mostly around developing the young people, which comes in a very different format and style if you do it actually with physical interaction. And there's other reasons why I do think a lot of young people that have been somewhere between in the evenings, Netflix and work and VCs, which I think is very unhealthy actually. I think we have to get them a little bit out of these models.
Yeah.
But I think that you have to be very honest about your own strategy and firm and business and be transparent with your people.
I might take a slightly different view because I do think we have, we've had a once in 100-year pandemic, and I think we're about to have a once in 100-year change of how we work. And having some flexibility, I think, is important. And so one of the ways we've been thinking about it, how do you optimize collaboration? So we totally believe, we've talked about culture, that you need to be in person and collaborate with each other. And at the same time, we've heard for years, I don't have thinking time, I don't have strategic thinking time. And so if you can have more flexibility in working from home and have more of that deep strategic thinking time, you might actually optimize your productivity. And so that's what we're hoping as we move to the new future of work, that we're going to have that balance.
And the time is running out, but I would like to play a game with my CEOs, and they are aware of this game. Don't worry, it's not Squid Games. I do this with my CEOs all the time. It's a quick rapid-fire round, and I'm going to pose questions to all four of you, and you just go from Jean, Jean, Steffen, and Bill, and we come back again. So my first question about leadership amidst change. One leadership trait that will be important, Jean.
Empowerment.
John?
Well, the same. I agree. And empowerment is a word which is magical for French because we don't know how to translate it. So I agree, empowerment.
Steffen?
Clarity.
Bill?
Empathy.
I like empathy. Nice. One leadership mistake to avoid, Jean.
Lack of transparency.
The main one for me is to think that the others think like you. And this is crucial. When I come to Singapore, I know that you don't think the way I think about the world or about the business. I have my standards. If we can agree, we agree. But I do not think you will do what I think. And what I mean by this, if I may say a word about substance, globalization is no longer there. There is fragmentation. And if we want to continue to have a worldwide business, which is not globalization, we need to be mindful about the fact that there is fragmentation and views can be different. If we are not aware, we go straight into big mistakes.
Steffen, one
I'll
mistake.
try to make up for the time. Short-term orientation.
Bill?
Hubris.
Sorry?
Hubris. That's the best one.
Best way to build a great team, Jean?
Diversity.
John?
Young people.
Steffen?
Hire entrepreneurs, not employees.
Bill?
Inclusion.
One piece of advice you would give to new graduates?
Be curious.
Be open-minded and humble.
Be patient.
Take the road less traveled.
And finally, this is a fun bit. What superpower would you like to have, to possess, to continue on this journey to lead companies, the companies that you're heading through change? Jean?
I'll take Superman's ability to fly, and I'll have a lower carbon footprint.
Jean?
Listening to Bill improved my English.
It's funny, I had the same. I want to fly, but not because of the business. I just like to fly, actually.
Definitely X-ray vision,
X-ray vision.
but into the mind.
That's scary.
I thought Bill was going to say, learn how to speak French.
My esteemed panelists, thank you
Bravo.
so much for your insights today. Please give them a warm round of applause, please.
Please welcome to the stage Ian Tan, Associate Director of the Asia Center at the Milken Institute, to give his closing remarks.
What an incredible session to end the Asia Summit. Thank you very much again to the moderator, all the excellent panelists for really an insightful final discussion. For those expecting to see Dr. Lawrence Summers and Ho Kwon Ping's fireside chat, unfortunately, Dr. Summers had to cancel his trip to Singapore, and he sends his deepest regrets. Over the last day and a half, we have had the tremendous honor of hosting you, our speakers, guests here in Singapore, and I sincerely hope you leave here with deeper insights, ideas to take back to your organizations, and I hope you were able to connect with your peers, your friends, and enjoy the lovely city of Singapore. Looking forward to next year, the Asia Summit will be back for its 9th year from September 28th to 30th, and it will be held during the Singapore Formula One Grand Prix weekend. Please save the date. We'll love to see all of you guys back. So this brings us to the end of the Asia Summit. Thank you all again for joining us today. As you leave, just a gentle reminder that in compliance with Singapore's safety requirements, we ask that you remain in your zone as you make your way out and keep a safe distance at all times. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.